Hello and welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to learn how we can find the sum of all the elements in an array. Now this is pretty simple, so you can probably do it on your own. Right, so as you can see, I made this array over here, which has 5 elements. 8, 45, 22, 60 and 9. I made an iterator I basically to store each element, and on the bottom left, I made a variable called C, which is initially set to 0. Now C is usually called a counter variable. In this case, I'm counting the sum of all my elements in my array. Now beside that, you can see I added an update over there. C is going to be equal to C plus A of I. And you can understand what this means. Now all it's saying is that if this is the initial value of my C, I keep adding every element to it to eventually find the sum of all my elements. You should probably understand how this program would work just by this example. But we'll manually iterate our array to see if we can find the sum of all our elements. So the value of I is initially 0. So all we're going to say is our C is equal to C plus A of 0. A of 0 is the first element of the array, 8. We're basically saying C is equal to 0 plus 8. So the value of C is going to change to 8. As you can see, I've now added the first element to my variable C. Next, our I is going to increment. Our I is going to become 1. So our update is going to be C is equal to C plus A of 1. If we substitute the values, it's basically saying C is equal to 8 plus 45. And we're going to change C to 53. Now remember, 53 is not the sum of all the elements. It's not an element in my array as well. 53 is basically the sum of the first 2 elements. So as you can see, in our first 2 iterations, I found the sum of the first 2 elements. So our C is going to be changed to 53. Now our I is going to increment again to 2. So we're just going to say C is equal to C plus A of 2. A of 2 is 22. So we're basically saying C is equal to 53 plus 22, which is basically 75. Remember, all this is saying is that the sum of our first 3 elements is 75. You can already understand that as I keep doing this, I'll find the sum of all my elements, the 5 elements. Our I is going to increment again to 3. C is equal to C plus A of 3. Our current C value is 75. So we're just going to say C is equal to 75 plus 60. And we're going to get C as 135. Finally, we found the sum of our first 4 elements. Our I is going to increment again to 4. This is our last element. C is equal to C plus A of 4. C is currently 135. Basically, C is 135 plus 9. So our final solution is going to be C equals 144. And if you add all the elements, you can see that I do get 144 as the sum of all my elements. Now this makes sense intuitively as well. All I'm doing is I'm adding each element to the sum of the previous elements to eventually find the sum of all my elements. Here, C is used as a counter variable to count the sum of all the elements. And now we're going to look at a different example where I made one of my elements negative. So let's just start iteration. Our I is initially set to 0. So all we're saying is our C value is equal to C plus A of 0. A of 0 is 8. So our C will be set to 8. Next, our I is going to increment to 1. C is equal to C plus A of 1. Basically, C is equal to 8 plus 45. So the new value of C will be 53, which is the sum of the first 2 elements in my array. Our I is going to increment again to 2. C is going to be equal to C plus A of 2. A of 2 is a negative value. It's negative 11. But it will add like usual, 53 plus negative 11. And it will obviously decrease to 42. So the sum of the first 3 elements is now 42. Next, what we're going to do is our I is going to increment again to 3. C is equal to C plus A of 3. Basically, C is equal to 42 plus 60. The new value of C is going to be 102. Next, our I is going to increment to 4. C is equal to C plus A of 4. A of 4 is 9. So C is equal to 102 plus 9. Basically, C is equal to 111. And this is the final sum of all my elements in my array. And if you add all your elements, you will see that this is indeed the sum that we get. Now, we're going to write the actual program to find the sum of the elements in an array. Right, so I made an array called A, which has 5 elements. 2, 22, 65, 13 and 171. Now we know that by observation, the sum of the elements is 273. What we want to do is write the program to actually find the sum of all these elements. So the program is pretty simple. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a for loop. So we'll add a for loop over here, which has an iterator I initially set to 0. The condition is going to be I is lesser than equal to 4, because 4 is the index number of the last element in my array A. We're just going to increment I by 1, and there we go. We have a for loop to iterate our array. Now we're going to make our counter variable to store the sum of all elements. So I'm just going to say int count is equal to 0. Back then I used C, here I'm using count. The name of the variable really doesn't matter. You just know that it's a counter variable, it's counting the sum of all the elements. And we know what we're going to do next. We're just going to say count is equal to count plus a of I inside our loop. So that each iteration, the value of count is added to finally get the sum of all the elements in my array. And after the loop, we're just going to print the value of count. Right, so let me just add a println statement for that. As you can see, I'm just printing count is the sum of all the elements. When I run this program, I should get 273 as the sum of my elements. And as you can see, that is what we get. So our program works pretty well. And that's it. That's all you need to know to find the sum of the elements in your array. Thank you and have a great day.